So before we start, do we have any apologies for today from everybody? I think we're all here, aren't we? Yeah. Okay. So number two is, are there any declarations of interest?
We didn't receive any declarations of interest, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Let's go straight on then. So item number three is the police area performance report. And so I think I'll hand over to Inspector Richard Ross.
Good morning, thanks. Chair, my intention would be to run over the report in its entirety and then take questions at the end, if that's suitable to yourself.
That would be fantastic.
Okay, nice. So just my assumption is you all have a copy of the report, but what I'll do is I will run over it and highlight some key points. So the introduction by the area commander on page 2, just highlight, obviously, he's commented on the fact that following the COVID challenges, which we still face some of, we've now moved into real cost of living challenges, which is impacting on our communities and also impacting on the service that's requested of the police and calls to us. So the team, we as a team, we look at that and we're working with our partners to try and mitigate any of these issues. In terms of our presence on the roads, you'll see from the report, there's been a lot of proactive work carried out, which I'll go on to detail. And throughout the last year, and what will continue this year, is our engagement with the visitor management plan and with the visitor management group, looking to prevent any issues in relation to the increased numbers we see in the area over the summer period. I know that that's a concern for a number of communities. In relation to crimes of violence, the area commanders commented on it's pleasing to see there's a significant reduction in the number of assaults compared to last year. It's also pleasing to see there has been no serious assaults and no assaults on emergency service workers during the period under review. In terms of fraud, fraud incidents continue to be an issue across many areas, and I'll go on to speak about that further in the report and the work that we're doing in relation to that. He also comments on the number of missing person inquiries that we have dealt with. And again, there has been an increase, but I'll speak a bit more in detail about that as we go through it. In terms of local policing priorities, they remain as road safety and road crime, antisocial behaviour, violence and disorder, acquisitive crime, protecting vulnerable people, serious organised crime, and terrorism and public order. Moving on to page 4. Firstly, apologies for the typo. That's due related to the Black Isle area. The overview of road safety and road crimes. Overall, road crime has increased against the 5-year average and also the last year to date. I probably would have expected an increase as more people were on the go following the easing of restrictions. So it's probably inevitable that there has been an increase. Obviously, there's mention of an increase in mobile phone offences and failure to insure against third-party risk offences. So that's proactive policing, detecting offences on the roads, show that the officers are out there detecting these offences. In terms of antisocial behaviour, overall antisocial behaviour has increased against the 5-year and the last year to date data. But in terms of the last year to date, it's one more crime over the period. So the numbers in terms of increase is quite low. So there has been a decrease in assaults over the last year and no serious assaults. In terms of acquisitive crime, there's been an increase in both the 5-year and the last year to date figure for overall acquisitive crime. And in terms of domestic house break-ins, there has been an increase again in terms of the 5-year and last year to date. Again, we're talking fairly low numbers, 1 and 2 crimes which, given the low numbers in the area, does make the percentage look quite high, but taken in context of the actual numbers. For fraud offences, there's been an increase over the 5-year and an increase over the last year to date. Again, as I said, that's following a national trend. In terms of protecting vulnerable people, overall sexual crime has increased compared to the 5-year average of 1.6 more crimes, but stayed the same as the last year to date. Pleasingly, it's good to see domestic crimes have fallen compared to both the 5-year and the last year to date figures. And in terms of hate crime, decreased in terms of the 5-year and last year to date. And in fact, there was no hate crimes recorded in the reporting period. In terms of serious and organised crime, you see the supply of drugs offences have decreased against the 5-year and the last year to date figures. Although work in this area does continue. There's a section in terms of counter-terrorism and domestic extremism. I'm not going to read that out. That's just a comment from our local counter-terrorism liaison officer, which is there to read. Going into the statistics in more detail. So in terms of road safety and road crime, in the reporting period, there's been thankfully no fatal RTCs. And that's the same as the previous year to date for this period. Drug driving or drink and drug driving offences have actually increased in terms of both 5-year and the last year to date. So there's 8 more offences detected this year compared to the previous year for this period. And so that's a proactive approach to dealing with this. But again, still disappointing to see the number of people who are taking that risk. Speeding offences have dropped slightly in the same period. In terms of our strategy for dealing with the road offences, obviously our Operation Cedar is our how we deal with road traffic, which is released to challenge, educate, detect and reduce. So that continues and is led by our road policing unit, supported by local police officers. In terms of antisocial behaviour, disorder and violence, as I said, we have had significant reductions in terms of assault, serious assault offences, and say no assaults on emergency workers. In terms of drug possession offences, they've reduced by 7 from 20 to 13 in the last year to date. So a comment in the section about the harm prevention officer role, which I previously mentioned. So that's coming up for review shortly, and it is hoped that that will continue to receive funding. The officer continues to be based in headquarters, but does carry out work into our area, looking to support people who are vulnerable to various types of drugs-related or substance-related issues. Moving on to acquisitive crime. As I said, the housebreaking dwelling stayed the same as last year. Frauds have increased by 3. So there's a common trend across many areas that frauds continue, particularly online, electronic type scams. In terms of that, we regularly put information out to the public in terms of scams, trying to keep them up to date with what the current trends are. Also for frauds, we continue to work alongside the financial institutes in the area in terms of the banking protocol, looking to identify people who may be victim to ongoing financial crimes and to intervene to stop that. There's obviously a section there about Rural Watch, which I would encourage you to read and sign up for the alerts. The section of acquisitive crime also relates to shoplifting. It's stayed kind of static compared to last year's data, but is less than the 5 years average. And in terms of motor vehicle crime, there was none within the reporting period, so a significant drop on both the 5-year and the last year to date. Moving on to protecting vulnerable people. As I said previously, sexual crime has stayed the same as the last year, although there is a slight rise on the 5-year average. Domestic crime has reduced on both counts, as has hate crime. In terms of missing people, so probably what's important to mention is the figures that are given in this report relate to our division. They are not specific to the Black Isle area. And that is just down to the way the data can be produced. We can't take it down to your specific area. The trend we're seeing is obviously there's been an increase in terms of adult missing persons and looked after children missing persons. In terms of that, yes, we do have residential establishments for looked after children in the Black Isle area, and looked after children who are missing is an ongoing issue. What we now have is a liaison officer allocated to each of these care homes, looking to work with the staff and residents to reduce the number of incidents that occur, and that work is ongoing. Moving on, so in terms of serious and organised crime, I say there has been a reduction in supply offences. We're not complacent. The area is still vulnerable to drug supply offences, and there's also a section in the report in terms of county lines. So that is an ongoing issue for all areas. And we have recently increased the number of officers who are within the unit that targets that. So whilst they're based in Inverness, they are a divisional resource and they do work into my area as well. So they are doing work in that area. In terms of the next section, counterterrorism, we don't report on statistics for that, but there is a section there to read from the local counterterrorism officer. In terms of the statistics in the report, they're there to see. I think I've covered the main points of it. Basically, would open up to questions from yourselves.
Thank you so much for all that information and such a detailed report, Richard. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into that. I've got a couple of wee questions for you before I hand over to my colleagues. You were talking about missing people and the difference between vulnerable adults and perhaps maybe looked after children. I know that when it comes to older people with dementia, there's the Herbert protocol that is useful for families to have information ready before people go missing. Is there a protocol like that in place for the looked after children where there's information ready to go should they go missing?
Yeah, so in terms of looked after children, obviously the care homes have a lot of information that they're able to provide us when a young person does go missing. Whilst you quite rightly said that in terms of vulnerable adults, it's badged as the Herbert protocol. It's not badged in a similar term, but they hold a lot of data which they provide to us to give lines of inquiry to trace the people. And obviously, they, prior to reporting to us, they risk assess the circumstances, and where it meets the criteria to report to us, it's reported as a missing person, and we investigate it and do a similar risk assessment as well. So there is a lot of liaison between the homes and ourselves in these incidents.
And I'm assuming that missing children who are looked after children are quite a priority then if they do go missing. It must be quite a huge amount of officer time, is it?
So each incident is risk assessed. They get a grading, and that then dictates the resources. Yes, missing people are resource intensive, but generally the risk is why the resources are deployed to these inquiries. So as I say, it's based on the individual circumstances and what inquiries we need to carry out. As I say, we're carrying out work in terms of staff and the residents to basically reduce the numbers, but also to try and encourage the young people to keep in contact with the care home staff if they're out, or to keep in contact with ourselves, which helps to mitigate any risk.
No, thank you for that. And the other question I had was around the drink and drug driving offences.
Yep.
Is there, because obviously they were put together, but would you say that, because I know historically that drink driving has been a bit of a problem in the Black Isle, would you say that it's still more an alcohol-related crime, or would you say it's more of a drug crime these days?
At the moment, I wouldn't want to say which is the majority without having the accurate figures. So traditionally, drink driving was what was detected more of. That also comes down to in the last few years, we've received new equipment and new powers in terms of drug driving. We now have roadside detection capability for drug driving, which we didn't have before. So that will have increased the number of detections for drug driving. And that is down to the new powers and the new equipment that's been provided to the police. But in terms of the breakdown for your specific area, I don't have that, but if that's information you want, I can try and obtain that.
Oh, that's okay, thank you. Sarah and Mortimer, do you have questions for Inspector Ross?
Yes, I just thank you very much for the report because it is really extensive. So thank you for that. I was just wondering if you know at all what is fueling the looked after children going missing. Is there anything that's happened that's particularly exacerbating or aggravating the situation? Do we have any data on that?
No, so what I probably would say is the figures we have to bear in mind is the figures are compared to the previous year, where we were still in some form of restrictions to an extent. So as people have got their ability to go out and about more, it probably has increased the risk of people going missing. So I think, as with a lot of stats at the moment, it's probably going to take a few years for things to settle out to make a clear judgment on what's occurring. But in terms of what gets reported to the police in my area, there's no concerns, there's no common thread that runs through them. Unfortunately, in terms of looked after children, there can be issues that can cause them to go missing, which they're obviously being supported for. But at the moment, there's nothing jumping out as a particular trend or concern that's causing it.
That's reassuring to hear. And do you know at all what the main age group of people who are going missing are? Because it's quite a big age group. So I was just wondering if we were able to narrow that down at all.
Oh, so in terms of looked after children or just in general?
Looked after children, but also in general, if you have that.
So looked after children, it tends to be those in teenage years. So 12 to 16 would be the most common for us. Younger children would be quite rare for a younger child looked after child to be missing. It's normally the sort of teenage years that we get reported to us. And in terms of, obviously, you can see the adult figures have also gone up. Exactly which age group that is, I would need to go back and research.
No problem. Thank you very much for that.
Hi, thanks for the report, Richard. Really interesting. A couple of things that my colleagues have already covered, but I'll just allude on the antisocial behaviour. Are these people that have been, the statistics of people that have been charged, or these reported antisocial behaviour? Because obviously we get quite a lot of emails, people complaining about neighbours, etc. So they're just complaining to us, they're not reporting to the police, and these incidents won't end up in the statistics, will they? Obviously.
Yeah, so what you have here is, so in terms of statistics, you've got it's reported crimes, and then the last column is detection rate. So that tells you how many of these we've detected. So yeah, that is crimes that have been reported to the police or recorded by us. But in terms of, unfortunately, information that's passed to councillors, if people don't phone in, we don't know about it. It's not included in the statistics.
And on the also on missing persons, I mean, there's a big leap for looked after children, which is quite worrying, but also adults. In your view, is this a result of, I mean, you said we've gone from a COVID crisis into a cost of living crisis. Is there any breakdown of male, female, missing adults, or, because there are a lot of people really struggling at the moment who might just be just disappearing because they can't cope. I mean, do we have any idea why there's been this spike for adults? being
Um,
missing, going missing, or just
I would need to find that out if there's any. I'm not aware of any particular trend. Again, it's similar to people have are out and about more. And it will take a couple of years for the figures to kind of settle out into what is the new norm as such. But I'm not aware of any specific issues highlighted in terms of a trend with adults. There could be many reasons why adults go missing, and many reasons what pressure has caused them, or what's caused the pressure on them to go missing. So, without going through each one, it'd be very difficult to say.
right. And finally, count the county lines. I mean, these networks are things that people wouldn't imagine that would be happening up here. People that move up here from cities, etc. How prolific are these networks? And is there any idea of how many of our vulnerable young people are impacted on this? And I know you do such great work in schools. The police obviously going into schools talking about a myriad of issues. Is this something that you are going to? Is there an education process going on with young people to deter them from this? Because it's just terrible. They get trapped into drugs, and that's it, isn't it, for them?
Yeah, so we currently have an ongoing programme in terms of education in the secondary schools, where we basically look at sort of the spiral into serious and organised crime. So there's a set input that's provided to all secondary school pupils in relation to that, and that's a continually ongoing process of keeping that up to date for education side of it. And in terms of county lines, whilst I wouldn't go into numbers of groups or people involved, our area has county lines activity, and that is being targeted. But I say in terms of going into sort of further details, that's not something I could really provide details on in numbers.
Is there if it's something that the public know more about, is there a hotline that if you suspect a young person might be vulnerable, and is there any way of just general public or people we know or staff in schools that have, if they're thinking, I'm worried about this young person, they might be involved in something like this. Is there any reporting mechanism for that?
Yes, so I would suggest if people have information regarding county lines activity or somebody they believe is vulnerable to that, I would suggest they contact police via 101 or come to a local police station, or contact Crime Stoppers if they want to provide the information anonymously. We rely on the public providing information to us, and I would encourage anybody who's got information about illegal activity in terms of drug supply to provide information to help us tackle it. But that's the route to a police officer at a station, by phone, or by Crime Stoppers. You can also contact us by the police contact us email, which is on our intranet, or on our internet page, I should say.
Thank you. We can put that information out to people. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for all of that, Inspector Ross. Really appreciate everything. So I take it we're quite happy to note the report then.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really helpful.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
So number 4 on our agenda is going to be looking at the rent report. So I think we've got Jake Mitchell with us.
Thank you, Chair. Morning,
Thank you. Are you wanting to just go ahead and present the report?
Happy to do that, yep.
Thank you.
So yeah, this is the HRA garage rent setting report for next year. Page 2 of the report before you provides a breakdown in terms of numbers, potential revenue and occupancy levels. And the tables at 6.3 in your report, they provide an illustration of what a 3, 5 or 7% increase would look like. Our recommendation is a 7% increase, with additional revenue being used to fund repairs and improvements to garages in the area. I don't need to explain to members the significant financial pressures facing the HRA going forward, but I think we can safely assume there will be limited scope for additional money for garage investment other than that generated by a rent increase. So what I'm trying to say is if we reduce the potential revenue when applying a rent increase, this will increase the challenge that we face when trying to improve the condition of some of our stock and make it an attractive product to offer. So in terms of a monthly increase, 7% equates to an increase of just under £3 per month for tenants and £3.60 per month for non-tenants. I'm happy to take any questions on that report.
I had a question. Are all of the garages, are they all like in a good standard? Are they all wind and watertight, that kind of thing?
I think to an extent they vary. Some are in better condition than others. Some need some investment. We are doing response repairs. If a tenant phones up and says their lock's jammed or something like that, that's happening. But we do need to look at some more, I suppose, strategic investment to ensure we're keeping that stock at a good level.
Can I ask? This is what the choices are for the other, for other areas. Presumably the recommendation has been the same across the piece, has it?
Yes, that's right, Councillor Aitken. They've all been, the 3, 5 and 7 has been modelled in all areas, and the recommendation has been 7.
Right.
Can I just ask, are all the garages in the Black Isle, are they currently all rented out, or do we have ones which are sitting empty at the moment?
At the time of the report, there are 7 empty, Councillor McCallum, 2 of which are just in the process of allocation and sign up, and I think 4 are just needing minor works, and there's 1 needing some more significant work. So I'm confident that figure of 7 will reduce over the next month or so.
Right, thank you for that.
Okay, do we have any further questions before we want to go to a decision?
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
It's very comprehensive.
Yeah, it was. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for the report, Jo. What
Definitely.
do you think, partners?
I personally feel like the middle ground is possibly the right option. Sort of, I think that there's going to be no easy or necessarily quick decisions in the current financial times. My gut feeling is that 7% feels quite high and 3% feels quite low. What do other members think?
I kind of agree with you, Lindsay. I think it's a really fine line between us needing to be able to maintain the garages and make sure that they're in a suitable state to be rented out, and also not wanting to burden people with increased prices when we're already in such a difficult situation at the moment with the price hikes. So I think the middle ground is probably the best option. It kind of gives that balance between the two. What do you think, Sarah?
I mean, my head would say 7, but I don't know enough about the state of the properties. And as you say, we've got to maintain these. We've got to maintain our stock. But I mean, the middle way seems a bit of a cop up, but it's actually probably quite sensible. I definitely wouldn't go for the lowest, because that's just, you're just treading water, aren't you? I mean, is there, of the 5%, is it possible for some? I mean, it will be possible for some maintenance, won't it? Particularly if we get the 7 are empty on board to bring in extra revenue. Jake, what are we?
Yeah, 5% will absolutely give us some extra revenue. So in that respect, will allow for some additional expenditure.
And will bringing the 7 on board, the empty 7, that will generate enough, but probably only enough to maintain those when they're being used, possibly. But it's bringing more money in. It's trying to find ways to bring more money in, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Aitken, that's right. And I think part of that is making the product as attractive as possible, and that can sometimes be a barrier in terms of allocating our garage stock.
Right. It's
Okay.
it's 5
Are we-
then, is it?
Are we happy to make it a decision of 5%?
Yes,
Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, 5% it is then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Jake.
you for your time, Jake.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so what was item 4 is now item 5, which is appointment of one member to the Cromarty Courthouse Trust. I would like to nominate Councillor McCallum, and I'm offering myself as a stand-in should she not be able to attend. How does that sit with everyone?
I'm
I'll
also happy
sec-
to do that.
I have to second Lindsay, shall I? I'll second you.
Sorry, Sarah, my enthusiasm got the better of me.
No, I think it's a great. I would have thought you anyway. Absolutely. I would definitely nominated you
Thank you.
if you're happy to do it.
Yes,
you're happy to
yeah,
do it.
I'm very happy. Thank you.
Okay,
Excellent.
So that one's a good. We are going through this at great pace today. So the next part of the agenda, which was 5 and is now 6, is the ward discretionary fund. So it's really just for noting that there was £150 given to the Singing for Fun rusher. So just everybody happy to note that? Yeah. And then so item 7 is now the roads capital programme. So if I could bring in Ian, that would be fantastic. Hello Ian, lovely to see you.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
So would you like to present the bit for the report then?
Certainly. This report is the capital programme for 23-24 for the Black Isle. And I'll explain funding, type of works, and the schemes that we've selected, how I've selected those schemes. And then I'll be asking the councillors to approve the programme. If we start off with the budget to begin with, the capital budget for the whole of Ross and Cromarty is just under £1.1 million. In my report, it shows a number of different capital allocations. However, the health and prosperity and the additional 10 million no longer exist in the 23-24 budget. As the 23-24 budget hasn't yet been approved, I've got to base my report on the baseline capital of just under £1.1 million from the current year. So within the capital budget, there's an element for surface dressing, which is £410,000, and overlay of £670,000 to give me the total of 1.1 million. As you'll be aware, the Ross and Cromarty capital budget hasn't been disaggregated to individual area committees. So the capital programme is based on the road network length in each area. Overall, Ross and Cromarty has 1,651 kilometres of roads. Ward 9 has 335 kilometres, meaning that effectively I have 20% of my capital budget to spend on the Black Isle. The total amount I've got to spend on the Black Isle comes to just short of £220,000. As discussed at the ward business meeting on the 19th of November, schemes are selected to both prevent further damage to the strategic road network and also to maintain local access roads. I've got to have this, if you like, this spectrum between putting money into preventative maintenance on the strategic roads or the main roads, such as the A832, but also trying to keep local access roads open. And it is a balance. Works can take the form of either surface dressing, overlay, or inlay. Surface dressing is where we spray bitumen emulsion onto the road surface before spreading and rolling in stone chips. This helps seal the road surface and improve skidding resistance, but crucially, it helps to extend the road's remaining life by sealing it and reducing the risk of the freeze-thaw cycle. Overlay is where we screed out dense bound macadam, what you would normally think of as tar, in layers of approximately 40 mil thick upwards. This adds strength to the existing road, and we use this where the road is deteriorated to the point where surface dressing isn't appropriate. And a slight variation on overlay is inlay. This is primarily used in urban areas where we have to work to specific levels, such as curbs, etc. Again, we screed out 40 mil layer of tar, but the difference is that we would take out the road surface to the same depth as we replace it. Both overlay and inlay add strength to the road surface, whereas surface dressing helps extend the road's remaining life. So we would tend to use surface dressing on strategic roads wherever possible, and overlay and inlay where it's gone too far. To give you some idea of the cost, overlay starts at around £20. Inlay can be around about £30, depending on how much curb work we have, how much iron work, etc. Whereas surface dressing comes in, and depending on how many potholes we have, but it comes in around about maybe £4.60 to maybe £10 a square metre. So clearly there's a balance between what we need to do and how much money we have. To help us deliver the schemes, the following programme was prioritised. We have a red line in the programme. Schemes above the red line can be funded from the expected capital allocation, but below the red line, they can only be funded if additional budget is made available. So the capital programme that was submitted was the North Keswick High Street, where we have 1.4 kilometres of surface dressing and 250 metres of inlay, and the A832 Manlocky Junction to Belmaduffy Junction, which comes in at 1.8 kilometres. Below the red line, we have the B9161 Boggallan from the A9 junction to Little Mill Bridge, the U2519 New Mills to Rosollis Road, the C1035 Shelty Burn Templands Glen Road, the U2507 Balblair Loop Road, C1031 Glen Road from the C27 Belmaduffy Junction through to the C1035 Fortrose Road Junction. The U2626 Glascairn Road to the entrance to the woodland. The B9169 from New Mills to Rosollis Free Church, and the B9163 Bayview Crescent and Marine Terrace in Cromarty. So, councillors, in conclusion, The Black Isle Capital Programme, it has a budget of £219,000, and it includes 3 schemes covering both strategic and local routes. I ask members to approve the programme, and I'll be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you so much for that, Ian. And I think we all appreciate the hard balance this is between roads that are in need of repair and available funds in which to do that. So, Sarah, would you like to start off with some questions?
Thanks, thank you, Ian. And I mean, if anyone, people who are watching this realise this has been a rather lengthy process, balancing, you know, over many months, balancing strategic, local, distance, because that's a factor, isn't it? You know, if the more you can get, you can have more efficiencies if you've got a slightly longer stretch of road. I mean, what's happened subsequently, obviously, is the recent bad weather, and I just want to know what your view would be, because there are other, I mean, obviously there are so many other roads that we could, that have been mentioned to us, that people write to us about, that you know about, that could so easily be on this list. And you know, one would be the Mount Eagle Road, because the recent bad weather has put everything in a whole different perspective. Given that red line is where it is, Ian, is there any, you know, and if, as you say, we haven't decided on the roads budget finally yet, but you've got to get on with a budget. Is there any wiggle room on this? Is there any way of adding in other schemes or prioritising? Is there any room for manoeuvre after today? I mean, this list is valid and valuable, but obviously there are other roads that might pop up ahead because of the damage done by the weather recently, that become quite critical. What would be the situation with that?
I think the schemes above the red line should proceed as planned. Several reasons for that. The most prominent is that the overlay and inlay can progress, apart from when it's in the depth of winter. They can progress more or less throughout the year, but surface dressing is very seasonal. Surface dressing has to be done in the summer, and we would normally get surface dressing train around about maybe the end of June, beginning of July. Prior to that, we have to have our noticing in to the Scottish Roadworks Register. So the surface dressing element, North Keswick High Street and Munlucky Junction to Belmaduffy Junction and the A32, they're kind of time dependent. Additional schemes can be added in, and I'd be happy to come back to the board business meeting to discuss what happens below that red line if additional money is made available to us.
I mean, we didn't put the red necessarily that list in. It wasn't kind of like, you know, it wasn't a kind of in order necessarily, was it? It was just the list became the list because we just thought we'd stick it to a certain number that looks more manageable and realistic. So that kind of flexibility would be hugely. I just think, I don't know what the other two think. I just think that would be flexible, so we can respond to events. But we have to appreciate that, Ian, you know, planning, you have to get your ducks in a row on all of this. We can't just go fix that road. What do you other two think?
Yeah, I think it's clear that the road condition is going to be an ever-changing picture, obviously, as time, weather all take its toll on the road network within the Black Isle. I'm quite happy to give approval for the 3 projects above the line, and obviously for Ian to come back to the business meeting and discuss future priorities as funds, if and when, become available. I think that's probably quite a wise course of action. Obviously, I think, we're all acutely aware, and we're all being told by residents of the Black Isle just how bad problem areas are that they come across on a daily basis. And, I think we all fully appreciate that the road network is far from perfect at the moment. But again, it is about the resources available and how those are distributed, isn't it? What's your thoughts, more from me?
Oh yeah, more from me.
No, I agree with what you're saying. I think it's a really difficult balancing act, and I think if you're able to come back to the business meeting, and it'd be really beneficial for us. Yeah, I think either way, we're in for a pretty tough year when it comes to the roads. So it's, no matter what we do, it's going to be difficult.
Ian, can I just get that clarification? This is for the benefit of people that speak to us and, contact us. A road might not look bad on the surface, but then, people see work being done on it, and these road lists might not look as bad, but as you say, you have to maintain the strategic, if you can, the strategic roads before they get bad. So and that's an important point that the public, that we need to understand, but also the public need to understand the decision making, obviously your professional judgment on this.
Yes, thank you. It really all comes down to the cost per square meter of whatever treatment you decide. As I've said, surface dressing, it might be around maybe about, depending on how bad the road is, maybe £4 to maybe £10 per square meter to treat, and that really only extends the remaining road's life. Whereas once a road has deteriorated to the point when you can't surface dress it, then you've really got to either overlay it in a rural situation or inlay it in an urban situation. Respectively, those costs can be in the region of £20 to £30 per square meter. So the more strategic roads, if you can extend their life by surface dressing, then you're going to reduce your overall cost. Essentially, it's like maintenance. No matter what you build, a house, a factory, a bridge, or a road, if you don't maintain it, it's going to deteriorate. And when it gets to the point when it's deteriorated too far, then you have to do some significant work. As most traffic uses the A-class roads, that's where I would put my money, the strategic roads, because by putting a little bit of money into those roads now, you're extending their life and you're getting more pounds per vehicle kilometres out of that investment than if you were to put the same amount of money into overlay works, which would form, because they cost an awful lot more, you would get a substantially reduced length of road. It is a balance though, because we can't treat all our strategic roads, because I am aware that some roads are in such a poor condition that it is making access difficult, and we have to try and find that sort of balance. But I'd be happy to add on any extra roads below the red line, and that can be discussed at a ward business meeting at a later date if additional money becomes available.
Thank you very much, Ian. I really, really do appreciate all the work that you're putting into this. Members, are we happy to agree the roads programme above the red line and work with Ian in the future at the board business meeting? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate your time today, Ian. Thank you.
That's all. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Ian.
Okay, number 8 on the agenda is the two common goods funds. So we've got part A and part B. the part A is the Cromarty Common Good Fund. So do we have questions, or are we just happy to start off by noting the Common Good Fund report?
Happy to note, and thank you. Thank
Okay.
Guy for getting it ready.
And then it's note and scrutinise the position of the Cromarty Common Good Fund as shown in the 22-23 Quarter 3 monitoring report and approve the proposed budget for 23-24. Are we all happy there?
Yep.
Thought we were all frozen for a moment there. And then, okay, so we can move on to what's now 8B, which will be the Fortrose and Rosemarkie Common Good Fund and accounts. So again, are we happy to note the Fortrose and Rosemarkie Common Good Fund annual report for 21-22? Okay, note and scrutinise the position of the Fortrose and Rosemarkie Common Good Fund as shown in the 22-23 Quarter 3 monitoring statement and approve the proposed budget for 23-24.
Yep. I had one question, I think, about High Life Highland. They only managed it's only the Fortrose Town Hall, isn't it? When you read the report, it looks as if everything's leased to them, but it's not.
No, it's just Fortrose Town Hall.
Right.
Yeah.
And is the other thing about, well, Fortrose Town Hall's an issue of all of its own. The need for investment in it and how it could become a better asset, but that's a longer discussion for another day, I think.
Yeah, it's complex to get money into the council unless it's money that we've been charged and able to apply for ourselves. It is difficult when it's the common good.
Yeah.
But there are ways. And with working with the community, that helps to boost interest in the hall as well.
And maybe High Life, because I remember when I was community councillor, we did have a kind of we had a meeting about it, but they gave us the usage of.
Yes.
And the usage is minimised really, because it's not. Which they did a great job. I mean, more people be using it than we thought. Mm-hmm. But even so, if it's a better asset, it becomes more attractive.
For letting.
Yeah.
Yes. The hall is tired. Internally, yeah. We could discuss it at a business meeting.
Yeah, we maybe just have a whole with the community council maybe as well. So
yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
But thank you for all your work into that, Di, getting them all organised for today. I really appreciate it. So the next one is going to be item number 9, the Community Regeneration Funds. So Fiona, if you're there, are you wanting to come on in? So thank you, Fiona, for all your work with all of these applications. Are you wanting to just take us through the bits and bobs?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So you'll be aware already that we talk about community regeneration funding. It's actually an umbrella term for a number of different funding streams. So within the Black Isle, the 2 funding streams that are available are the Highland Coastal Communities Fund, where there's an allocation of £19,436, and also the Place-Based Investment Programme, which is a capital fund, and you have an allocation of £85,200. So in total, the amount of funding you have available today to award is £104,636. We've got 5 applications under consideration today, and you will note from the committee paperwork that the total of these grant requests is for £109,232, so just slightly over what you have available. Of the 5 applications, we've undertaken a technical assessment on all of these, and we've also provided a RAG summary spreadsheet, which is just showing how we've given a red, amber or green rating against some of the key assessment criteria we would look at. What I would say about that is that we undertake that work on the basis of information that the applicants provide to us in the application process. So it is just purely done on what applicants have told us. So where there's an amber or a red, it's not a comment on the value of the project at all. It's generally just either flagging up a concern that there's maybe something outstanding, for example, a match funding award or a lease, something technical like that. Or it may just be that the applicant only provided brief information in the application form itself. So where we've got things flagged up as amber or red, it's not a barrier to members approving these projects today, but what I would say is that we'd usually try and address these concerns by attaching technical conditions to any funding approval that's given. I think that's kind of just the main points in terms of background. I'd be happy to either talk you through the project individually or just hand back to yourself, Chair, to answer any queries, or to stop at this point for any queries, maybe be sensible.
Well, why don't I open it up to the other members? Do you have any particular feeling on how you'd like the next bit to go?
Do we want to chat through each of them one by one? What do you think, Chair, to be useful?
I think
I'm
it might
sure
be
we've
quite
got
useful to have a wee, maybe not the full, because obviously we've had time to go through all of the applications as well. So Fiona, perhaps it might be useful if you do a very quick summary rather than going through everything in detail of, because it's five applications, five, getting my numbers mixed up there. Yeah, if you just very quickly run through what the 5 applications are, just for other people's benefit.
Of course, yes. And what I'll do is just maybe reference any of the key points out of the RAG assessment and why we've given these ratings. So the first one on my spreadsheet here is, I'm not sure I've got them in the same order, but it's the Black Isle Music Initiative. This is a fairly small request from the organisation to mainly cover the costs of venue hire and the purchase of 3 new keyboards. So it's a service that exists to provide music tuition to children across the Black Isle, and they offer it in a group setting, which means they can keep the cost of offering it low and thus have more people participate in it. This is actually an expression of interest that came in just at the end of the last round of funding when there was no funds available. So we advised them to bring it forward again to this round, and you would have seen the expression of interest when it came in. I think the 2 things I would highlight about this project, firstly, to explain the red that's in the assessment there under engagement and support. It's, again, as I said earlier, just a reflection there of what was in the application form. I think other projects had provided letters of support and a bit more formal evidence that there was a need for the project. This applicant had said that the service has been sustaining itself for 6 years and that they could show through the levels of people using it that there was good support, which I wouldn't dispute at all, but just in terms of the evidence provided, it was marked down a bit. And the other thing I would draw members' attention to is under project robustness. I've marked an amber because I think if members wish to approve this project, we would have a couple of governance issues to resolve. So currently this application is being made from a private individual. We would be able to progress it on that basis, but if that was the case, I would want to do a different assessment, which would be around displacement and public subsidy, just to check there were no issues there. And secondly, we would need to look at the full costs of the service. So on my advice, the applicant has restricted their application just to the venue hire and keyboards at the moment. We wouldn't be able to 100% fund a private individual, but there are existing costs there that we could bring back in, which would be around the music tuition and the tutor fees. So there'd be a couple of issues to resolve if members want to go ahead and approve that. But as I say, it's not a barrier to approving it today, just a couple of things to flag up. The second one is the upgrade of the toilets in Och at the harbour. And again, this is where the applicant had included more costs at application stage, but on my advice, we've cut this back to just what they would be looking to fund specifically with this funding. Again, just to do with the administration of the project to make it a bit easier for the applicant. So essentially what they would like to do is to strip down the walls and repaint the interior and the exterior. And the cost that's given there is based on a quote that they got in about November. So I think it's a fairly realistic cost to be looking at. aside from that, I don't think there's anything in particular I'd flag up from the assessment. It scored quite well. The next one on my list is the Kilbokie Village Hub Toilets and Potting Shed. So this is probably a project that members are aware of, but given the scale of the project, the applicant has chosen to try and progress this in a phased manner. So this would be the first phase of installing the foundations, some of the all abilities paths, the landscaping and groundworks to get started on the toilets and potting shed. So given that it's a phased application, it's quite difficult to score the project well in things like legacy and exit strategy. But what I would say is it is an essential phase if that full project is to be delivered. The applicant has outlined credible plans for securing funding for the next phase and also a contingency option. So if funds aren't secured, it would still be possible on the work that's done just now under this application to put a smaller building on the site. The Och Community Rowing Club have applied for funding towards putting a new boat shed and workshop into Och. So they've been raising funding for this from a variety of sources, and they have secured Sport Scotland funding of 79,000 towards the project and have 2 other match funding applications outstanding at the moment. They are in the process of getting a lease in place with Broadlands, who own the land, and I think it's all but signed or possibly been signed this week. It was very close to being done. But again, that's where it's been slightly marked down on project robustness, just to reflect that there's some of these things that would need to be put in place before any project could start with funding, should you choose to approve it today. And then the final one is Ferrintosh Hall, who are looking for funding to really just to put a new roof on the building. So again, this is based on work they've done with an architect and a local supplier around what the costs might be. So I would think fairly realistic costs. And they would be taking the tiles off and replacing them with a more modern equivalent, and also the flashings and associated work. Just to explain in the match funding where the red comes from in the RAG assessment, we have prompts that we work to so that we can be consistent across all applications in all areas when we're grading them, and we will mark a project as red for match funding if they've applied for 100%. So it's not that there's match funding outstanding, it's just that they've requested the full amount from yourselves today. But given that there was no limit put on what applicants could request, that again, it shouldn't really be seen as a criticism of the project. And I think although some of the other projects look like 100% requests, they were able to outline quite clearly what other costs they were covering as part of the project, or that there would be in-kind time. I suspect in this case as well, it would be fair to say that there is probably in-kind time from the whole committee in managing the project. It just wasn't explicitly stated in the application form. So in summary, I have no major concerns about the project, and I think I've covered the main things we would want to address should members wish to approve any of them, but happy to answer any questions you might have.
Fantastic, thank you. I think this is probably a point where we could all come in and just have a bit of a discussion. And I think that's quite a sensible way forward. Obviously, the main concern is that we have more project than we have funds to allocate. So obviously today, not everybody is going to be successful in getting everything that they asked for. I think that's important to acknowledge, but it's not necessarily a reflection on anybody. It's just a simple fact of having more application than we have money available. So, members, if I'd like to hear your thoughts before we have a little bit of a chat about it before we make any decisions.
I was going to ask, I think we might all share slight reservations about public money going to a private individual, albeit for a hugely socially beneficial purpose. I mean, I'm so, pro arts and education, and I just feel every child should do music. I mean, used to be quite a regular thing in school anyway, but the project sounds great, but I know that that would be maybe opening a floodgate a bit as well. It was set not a great precedent. I mean, what are your views on that?
My personal view is a bit like yourself, Sarah. I think the Black Isle Music Initiative is a absolutely fantastic scheme, and what they achieve on a weekly basis with children is brilliant. I think my personal gut feeling is I would like to see this as a constituted group with good governance in place to be able to fund this scheme appropriately. So yeah, my gut feeling on the Black Isle Music Initiative would be that we defer it at the moment.
Yeah, I have some ingredients with both of you. I think what they're doing is absolutely incredible. And I think music is so important to all children. So I definitely don't want to discourage them in any way. But I do think I agree with you in that they need to form a constituted group and that we should possibly defer them for the next round of funding so that they have time to put that in place.
Fiona, can I just say, well, firstly, thank you because you just seem to be giving so much support and advice and, way beyond what you'd expect for this kind of process to the groups that have applied for the funding. Is there any way of helping a group? Does the system help a group become constituted? Because it may seem more complicated than it appears. Everyone goes, oh, bureaucracy, help, I don't want to be doing all of that. But actually, having been, involved in setting up of a trust to take over the toilet and that kind of thing, it isn't huge. It isn't it doesn't have to be as complicated as it might appear, or to the in the media and things, and in the wider public. Is it difficult to do that and complex?
It's not particularly, I mean, my understanding is it can be as complex as you want to make it, and it should probably be appropriate to the nature of the group and the level of why you would want to become constituted. I mean, generally we would suggest going to some of the third sector support organisations, and what we've done in the past with applicants that have been in a situation like this is I have quite a good link that I could provide them with, which outlines the benefits of becoming a constituted group, and it gives them some fairly easy to work through templates to draw up their own constitution. And also there'll be the Council for Voluntary Services locally who could provide sort of governance support as well, so we would signpost them there. So yes, essentially, if that was kind of the feedback from yourselves as members today, I'd be happy to go back to the applicant and explain that.
And also, is it, you're a business or you're a charity? It's that, I know if you love music and you love being a teacher and you love children doing music, but you've also got to earn a living, haven't you? There's that kind of balance of, there's nothing wrong with being a business that does this successfully, but it has to be sustainable and viable. But if you want that extra, I mean, there's a social enterprise, there's lots of different models, a not-for-profit. There are different models to be constituted, aren't there?
Absolutely. And I mean, again, I wouldn't claim to be an expert on it, but could certainly signpost any applicant to those who are and would be able to give that advice. And I think you're absolutely right. It's quite a different situation to be a private business operating commercially and charging commercial rates, or an organisation that has more social aims. And certainly, I think most public funders would require you to be a constituted group if you were trying to deliver social aims and use public funding to do it. So it's perhaps it would certainly be a choice for the applicant, but I could give that feedback.
Thank you.
No, absolutely, Fiona. I think I absolutely agree. You've put a power of work into all of this, and I think it's quite remarkable how much work you have put in. So are we all agreeing then at the moment to defer the music initiative and encourage them in a positive way to become a constituted group to look at funding a future funding round? Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that leaves us with 4 applications to consider obviously at this area meeting. I think, in my opinion, the remaining 4 applications are all incredibly important to their communities and will have, big impact on the Black Isle. I think each one of them is incredibly worthy on their own merits. Would either of you like to come in with your thoughts on any particular applications?
I must say that the OC, the rowing is just being so transformative for the village over the years. I actually was quite shocked that they didn't have a shed when I got elected and got the email. Oh, what do you mean you haven't got a shed? So to me, it's a complete no-brainer, and I think they're incredibly proactive and creating community. And there's so many spin-off benefits, but they definitely need, they do need a shed. Being very pragmatic. Also, the toilets, we haven't, the whole toilet thing. Kilbogie needs a toilet. There's a village without a toilet, and the harbour have done, fantastically well taking a toilet that was going to close, would have closed. There wouldn't have been a toilet in Ock if they hadn't taken it over. So again, you want to keep these spaces nice. It's good for the image of the Black Isle with visitors coming and everything, as well as locals needing, parking up and needing to go to the loo.
My gut feeling is that it's incredibly, our village halls in the Black Isle are incredibly important to just every community, and I think that the Ferrintosh Hall, looking at the longevity of its hall in terms of its roof is really encouraging. And I think the other thing I'd like to say about all these applications is that they're all a credit to the huge amount of volunteers that are behind them that have made the applications possible and put the effort that they do into the various communities in the Black Isle. I think they're all fantastic. Obviously, all 4 applications add up to just over £1,000 over the amount of funding that we have to allocate. The smallest application in terms of funding left would be the Och Harbour toilet. And it would feel unfair to remove any funding from that scheme and possibly would make it unviable. Are we happy that the Och toilet should be funded in full?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
Okay. And how would members feel about the remaining 3 applications, each being reduced by an equal amount of the available funds that we have left? Would that be in agreement with everyone?
Yeah, I think that's the most fair way in which to do it. So I'm in agreement with that.
Yes, because they're pretty, they're fairly hefty, so it won't make a huge difference. So yeah, I agree with that, Lindsay. Thanks.
How does that do, Fiona?
Yes, that's fine. I was just trying to work out the figures quickly there. I think if the Och Harbour toilets was being awarded the 2,000, that would mean you are just, as you said, Chair, just £1,018.54 in excess of requests. So I think splitting that equally between the 3 projects, we would be reducing all the grant requests by around £339. So arguably not a massive impact. So I'd be happy to revise the requests on that basis if that's how members want to go ahead with that today. And that would be the approval figures then.
I'd be happy with that. Yeah. Thank you very much, Fiona. I really appreciate everything that you've put into this.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Fiona.
And then we are on to our very last item, which is the noting the minutes of the last meeting. So were we all happy with them? Yep. Okay. Well, in that case, thank you all for your time today, and I really appreciate it. And I think that'll bring the meeting to a close. So thank you all for your time, and we'll see you next time.